This webinar is going to teach you about web groups. Web groups are a relatively recent feature on the Biosec website that allow you to build, store, and share sets of Biosec objects, such as genes or metabolites or any other object in the knowledge base. Web groups are linked to your account, and we can get to them through the Tools menu, Groups. This is the groups directory. This shows you groups that I've created here, or groups that are public that other people may have created. So we'll start by creating our own group by uploading a file of genes. So let's take a look at the file. This is the file here. So it's just a one column list of gene names, although you can have extra columns in here as well. So you go to the Groups menu and say New Group from Uploaded File. It pops up a little dialog, and you can specify the file, which is TRP differentiated genes. And we'll say that the first line is a column header, which it is, and it will try to convert those names into Biosec objects. So we say upload and create the group, and it does it. So now we have a group of our own, and it's got about 121 rows. Each row is a gene. It's got one column. So a group is structured somewhat like a spreadsheet with rows and columns. Typically the first column is the primary object in your group. Here it's genes, and then other columns are properties of that gene or objects that are related to that gene. So we'll start by adding a property column from this menu here. We'll add a column for the synonyms so we can see what other names there are for all these genes. And we can see some have them, some don't, some have more than one. And transforms work similarly, that they'll create a new column, but here we're exploring relationships between objects in the knowledge base. So since we have here a column of genes, this shows transforms that apply to genes. So we can, for instance, add a column with the product of the gene. So that's here. Or we can add a column that show what pathways the gene is in. Let's run it right here, pathways of gene. So each of these operations adds a new column. You can also take select those columns and do transformations of that. So now we can do transformations on these pathways. For instance, we can show the reactions in that pathway. So that's going to add another column. We're getting a little big here. So it shows for each of those pathways what the reactions that are in those pathways. So let's get rid of some of this now. And so you can also, we created this group by uploading a file. You can also download a group to a spreadsheet file. We can do that. That downloads it to a spreadsheet file. We will just take a look at that in the text editor here briefly. That has, and so this spreadsheet has the additional columns that we've added in here. So we can also do things like take the gene set and paint it on the cellular overview. Except it didn't show up. So we'll have to look at that. That is strange. Interesting. Well, that didn't work, so we will Go back and fix that later. So let's take another look at a way to make a group. So you can do searches. You can build groups in various ways from within the Pathway Tools website. So we'll show one way to do that. So we'll start by finding a protein that we're interested in by doing a search on ARCA. Then that gives us lists of results. We can turn those lists into groups, but instead we're just going to focus on this one particular protein that we're interested in, the RK phosphorylated DNA binding transcriptional dual regulator. So we click on that as we normally do. Now notice each object page, such as this protein page, has an Add to Group button. If you put the mouse over that, that expands a little bit and it shows you some options. You can take that object and add it to an existing group. We can add it to the group we built before, or we can build a new group with just that object. So let's do that. We'll pick new group, pick add, and that didn't work, oddly enough. Let's reload the page and try again. Okay. So now it created that group and it put a link to that group in the box. So we can click on there and now we're at our group. So this is a group of one object, which by itself is probably not very interesting, but we can do transforms on that. So let's get all of the genes that are regulated by that protein. In this case, there's quite a few. So that's a long list of genes. It's all in this one, they're all in this one cell of the group because the group only has the one row from the way we created before. But we can take that second column and turn that into a group of its own. So that's what the green button at the top of a column does. That takes all objects that appear in that column and makes them into a new group. We'll click on that. So there's our new group. So that has two columns. The first one is the genes from that column, and the second one is the object that matched it. In this case, there was only one object that could be matched, so that's not very interesting. So we'll just delete that. And this name is kind of long, so we'll change that. So some of the names of groups and columns you can change by clicking on them, and they turn it into there we go. So now we have a set of genes that are regulated by that one thing. Let's say we want to learn something about them. So now we'll take a look at another feature of groups, and that's enrichment analysis. So enrichment analysis is a statistical technique that, given a set of objects, will find related objects where that first group is statistically over or underrepresented. So we'll see what that means. So look at the enrichment menu here. So we have a set of genes. These are enrichments that apply to genes. And we'll enrich this gene set for pathways. So what that means, well, first it pops up this dialog that lets us parameterize the enrichment a little bit. We'll just use the default options. But what that's going to do is that's going to find pathways that are related to these genes, where these genes are statistically overrepresented in those pathways. So let's let that go and see what that looks like. There we go. So this makes a new group. And that group, each row is a pathway, or the first column is a pathway. Second column is the p-value that indicates what the statistical significance of that relationship is. And the group is sorted by p-value, so the objects that appear first are those where the gene group is most statistically overrepresented. And then it also shows you the genes that match that pathway. So that's the reason that this pathway was selected, is because those genes were in our group. And then for other entries, those sets will be different. Since the gene sets are kind of long, we'll delete that column. And that lets us get a little better look at the list of pathways. So these are the pathways where that set of genes are overrepresented. So those are pathways that we might end up be looking at. So anyway, that's the end of this webinar. We will have some subsequent webinars on web groups that explain more advanced features, but I hope this gives you a sense of what web groups can do.